afternoon, and welcome to the third day of ELT Week Argentina 2026. We're so happy to have you again. You already know me. I'm Mariela Masuyama. I'll be your host. I'm head of English and School Education Programs with the British Council in Argentina. And we are halfway through our ELT week. Can you believe? If you have missed any of the previous sessions that we had on Monday and Tuesday, make sure you take the time to watch them at our British Council Argentina YouTube channel. And just before we start, a quick reminder that safeguarding is a priority for the British Council. So you are encouraged to leave your comments and thoughts in the chat, making sure that you maintain a respectful and positive communication and without posting any personal or sensitive information in the chat. You will get certificate of attendance at the end of the event. Make sure that you come back on Friday to get the link to a form that we need to register your participation, your name, your email address, so we can make sure you receive your certificate. If you're not available on Friday, we will still send emails to all our registered participants with the link to the form and a reminder to complete it. And also, before we begin, we would like to thank again our partner, Brit Cham, for supporting this event and helping make it happen. So, without further ado, let's talk about our first session today. It is my pleasure to welcome Melissa Miralles. She's an English language teacher and graduate of and researcher at Universidad Nacional de Mar del Plata. She's a former Fulbright scholar and holds a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from the University of Washington with a specialization in language, literacy, and culture. Her current research focuses on decolonial and critical approaches to language education and the integration of global citizenship education into English language teaching in Latin America. In this session, she will be exploring using global citizenship education, or GCE, as a framework to give ELT content a critical perspective and greater purpose and relevance. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here to share this space with you. I'm seeing we have people from different parts of Argentina. I can see I encourage you to write down in the chat where you are from. I can see people from Santa Fe, Córdoba, Salta, Tucumán, Buenos Aires, Cava. Wow, that's great. Junín. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for writing that. Okay, so are we ready? I'm very excited to share with you this topic that I'm very passionate about, and that is something that I've been working during the last years. Okay, so I really hope you enjoy it and you find it very useful and meaningful. Okay, so my presentation is titled Beyond Language Skills, Embedding Global Citizenship Education in the English Classroom. Before we start, I would like to briefly go over our agenda so that you can anticipate how the session is going to be. We're going to start with a brief initial reflection. Then we're going to transition to the theoretical background. Yes, we're going to get into the concept of global citizenship education. I'm going to go over some principles and key information, and then we're going to go from theory to practice. Yes, and we're going to see and explore together some concrete examples of teaching sequences, right, and ideas, so as to show you how we can implement global citizenship education in our daily practice, okay? And we're gonna end with an exit ticket, okay? So I need you to have a lot of energy today because we have a lot of things to do and discuss. Okay, so we're gonna start with a hypothetical situation, okay? I'm gonna read this text that says, Miss Mary and Miss Noelia are working on reading skills with their students. They decide to use a reading activity from their textbook about Mexico City. However, their approach to the lesson is different, okay? I'm going to show you how that class, how Miss Mary's class and Miss Noelia class is, and you will have to answer in the chat which English class would you would be more interested in attending, okay? Are we ready? Let's go. For class number 1, that's Miss Mary. She decides to work, imagine that she has this reading activity in the textbook that she's using, okay? So she decides to start with, the text is about Mexico City. So she decides to use the pre-reading activity that the book offers, okay, which reads, have you been to Mexico? What is Mexico famous for? Okay, so she asks students, right, as a warm-up to the topic and try to see what to activate their previous ideas regarding the topic, right? She also uses the picture, right, as you can see, the one that is that comes in the book, and then she transitions to the comprehension activities, right? So she starts with, as you can see, activity number 1. She asks students to choose the best title for that text that they have just read, okay? And in activity number 2, she has the true and false, typical activity that we like doing a lot, in which students have to write true and false, right, and justify false statements. Once that is over, she transitions to the last activity, right, the typical activity in which we ask students to produce something, right? So in this case, they have to choose a city that they really like, and they have to design a poster that presents key information about it, right? Like location, culture, attractions, food places to go. That's class number 1, okay? Miss Mary's class. Class number 2 is a little bit different, right? Miss Noelia, she decided to change the pre-reading activity, okay? So instead of using the one from the book, she starts the class by showing students 2 pictures, okay, as you can see here in the slide. And she asked them to match each of those words, right? Most of them are adjectives, with the picture that they think that word is connected to, okay? So beautiful, clean, happy, they have to decide the picture that they associated with, okay? After that, they discuss a little bit about those their choices, and then she transitioned to the comprehension part, right? So she asked students to do activity number 1. The same text as class number 1. Title, true and false, right, for the comprehension section. But she doesn't do activity number 3. Remember the one about the poster? She says, she asks the students, right? She says, okay, we have read about Mexico, we have read about nice places to go, the features, right? Nice characteristics of the city. But she says, what about the challenges of living in a big city like Mexico City? What do you think? What do you remember from the earlier photo, right? So she goes back to the pre-reading activity. And she says, she discussed a little bit with the students, and then she says, okay, I'm going to hand in a copy, right, of a second part, right, from the reading you have just done, and you're going to, in pairs, you're going to read this, right, and you're going to see how you connect that with the picture that we have just seen before, okay? We're not going to read this now, but basically this part of the text focuses on the challenges that nowadays people living in Mexico City face, right? 2 of those are air pollution, right? Air quality, and regular access to clean water. Basically, that's what the text is about. And the activity that she decides to do, instead of doing the poster from class number 1, she asks students in pairs to design a poster that shows the problems that are being described in the text, right? They can use drawings, symbols, short phrases. They have to include a strong title, right? And that poster, the goal of that activity is to raise awareness and encourage people to take action of what's happening in Mexico City right now. Yes, how citizens are struggling, right, with air pollution and access to clean water. Okay, so those posters should reflect that. Yes, that activity, she uses that in order to check, right, what students have understood from the text, right? Because the more details they include in that poster, well, the better the comprehension was, right? Because they could understand the challenges that are being expressed and who is being affected, right, and why. So once those posters are done, right, before the ending of the class, she tells the students, okay, for next class, we're going to continue with this topic. And I want you to think about now your country, like our country, right? In this case, Argentina, right? Do our big cities have the same problems or different ones from the ones we have just seen in Mexico? So she leaves that question, right? And asks the students to think about that for next class, because next class, they're going to continue talking about the same topic, but in connection to their own, what they see in their reality. Okay? So, with that being said, I want you to put yourself in your students' shoes, right? And tell me, which class would you be more interested in attending and why? Class number 1, Miss Mary, or class 2, Miss Noelia? I want to see, I'm going to read your comments. If you can explain why, that would be great, okay? If not, that's okay. I can read class 2, Lillian, class 2, both classes are great, but I consider class B is more dynamic and challenging for the students to think, to elaborate a topic and discuss about it. Class 2, I believe I would like class 2, okay? Well, class 2 seems to be the winner, right? Class 2 for more advanced students, okay, we can talk about that. More interesting and engaging, okay, both, okay, class 2, good. Thank you so much. I knew Noelia was the one, okay, good. Class 2, I would say the impact in the community can be real. Oh, I like that word. We're going to talk about that. Class 1, Miss Mary, class 2 could be much more info for the students. Okay, at least activity in split in parts. Okay, more challenging maybe. Yes, here we are generalizing. We don't know exactly the level of students. I guess that each of you are thinking about your own groups, and that's okay. Class 2, okay, good. Well, it seems that class 2 seems to be the winner. And I can see that, I can see the words engagement, more interesting, more real, active, dynamic, more challenging. Here it says, create consciousness about ecology. Okay, I like that. So thank you so much for those comments. I agree with you. Yes, if I were a student and I were in high school, I would definitely like to go to Miss Noelia's class. But as a teacher, my arguments would be that the content in the way that the class 2 is designed seems to be more relevant, more meaningful, more memorable. And why is that? Because it allows for connection with local context, okay? So when I'm making the student connect the topic, whatever they are reading in a textbook about anything, and I'm making that connection clear, I'm making them think how that is reflected in their own communities, in their own countries, in their own cities, right? That I'm bringing the relevance, okay, to the topic, and that will probably make that content more memorable, right, for the student as well. The class even more memorable. The project, how they get involved in the activity, right? It brings real life issues into the classroom, right? Instead of presenting an idealized world. And I has to do with a personal opinion. I think that sometimes the material in English textbooks portray just one side of the world, right? I feel that sometimes materials, especially when we talk about how they portray the English culture itself, they seem to focus just on these idealized cities, idealized places. And I'm not saying that, we shouldn't talk about all the nice things, right? But what I say is that that should not be the only thing we talk about, okay? So I love to see cities like New York, London, Sydney in my books, and I love to share that with my students, but I would also like them to see other things, right? Which are also part of the culture of the countries that I'm talking about, right? So we talk about big cities and all the things that they have to offer. And when do we talk about the challenges that people living in those cities have? When do we talk about who are affected by those challenges mostly, right? So this is where I want to go, right, with this presentation. I think that there is more that we can do in our classes. And I think that the more real our material is, the better. At the same time, by doing this, we are encouraging critical thinking and deeper questions, right? We are helping them to start thinking about all these things, right? So, with that being said, I always like to say that I try to, when I'm teaching a class, when I'm thinking about a class, designing a lesson plan, I would like that if in the middle of the class, I asked a student, what are we doing this activity for, right? I try to think what the answer would be, right? And I think that if we ask that in class number 1, maybe the answer could be, we're practicing our reading skills. But if we ask the same question in class number 2, maybe we get a slightly different answer, right? And we're not just practicing reading skills, which is great and it is important, but we're also thinking deeper about the complexities of living in megacities, right? We are connecting that with our realities. We are thinking about our own challenges, right? In our own context, right? We are being asked to ponder our own questions, right? So questions like this one, like the one you have there, what does this text tell us about life in a mega city like Mexico City? Well, that would not happen if we don't make it happen, okay? So this presentation and this session has to do with that, right? What is it that we can plan in advance when we think about our classes so that we bring all this critical thinking and all this vision into our practice, okay? So what I'm proposing, or what I suggest doing, is that I'm not saying this is the only way, but the way that I suggest doing it is using the concept of global citizenship education, okay? This is a term coined by the UNESCO, and if we have to define, we can say that is an educational framework that equips learners with the knowledge, skills, values, and competencies to take active roles locally and globally to address 21st century's challenges and to contribute to a world that is more peaceful, just, tolerant, and sustainable. So how does it work? I would like to expand a little bit more on this. I'm going to be talking about the dimensions, right, of global citizenship education, and then the themes, and then I'm going to explain why it is important to start bringing this concept more to our practice. When we talk about global citizenship education, we have to consider the 3 core dimensions, okay? which are cognitive, the social-emotional, and the behavioral, right? So if we're really working with global citizenship education, we should be exploring these three domains, okay? In the activities we think, in the materials we choose, in what we ask students to do. So when we say cognitive, we're talking about mainly the knowledge, the understanding, the critical thinking of global and local issues, right? What we have just seen, what we have just seen before in the activity, right? How adding that second part enriches the material, okay? I'm not just talking about beautiful things about the city. I'm also talking about challenges, right? And also, it has to do with the complex interconnection and interdependency of countries, okay? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. When we talk about the social-emotional domain, we're talking about developing that sense of belonging to a common humanity, okay? We belong to something bigger than just our nation, our community, right? We belong all to this world, right? And because of that, we are global citizens, right? But we have to develop skills to behave as global citizens, right? And because we all belong to a common humanity, we share values, responsibilities, right? We need to develop our empathy, our respect for diversity, for differences. But we need to teach that. And behavioral, we're talking about the ability to act effectively and responsibly at all levels, okay? So behavioral has to do with how I act, right? Ideally, I should act in coherence with what I think and how I feel, right? So if I understand the issues, if I can feel empathy for that, then I will act as a consequence, right? I will act accordingly, right? And I will think about, okay, I will take action. I will take care of someone who needs my help, right? I will take care of the environment. So this is what the three core dimensions are about. Now, on that note, for global citizenship education in the concept as a theory, it's also very important to explore the themes. There are specific categories, themes that are related to, that are considered important for someone who considers themselves as global citizens, okay? Which are those themes? So here you have one for each, there is one in each arrow. I'm gonna read them. Globalization and interdependence, okay? So common topics for this theme: social, cultural, technological changes across borders, right? We're living in a world that is changing so fast, so many changes, right? How do all those changes affect our communities, our whole world? Social justice and inequality, right? Everything related to human rights, income disparity, indigenous people and culture. Identity and diversity, discrimination, oppression, gender inequity, racial minorities. I'm very surprised that we spend a lot of time talking about American culture and we hardly ever address indigenous communities, or we hardly ever address racial minorities in the US, their voices. The next one, sustainable development, right? Topics like natural resources, biodiversity, climate change, environmental degradation. And finally, peace and conflict, right? Topics like refugee crisis, migration, and conflicts, okay? And here, I wanna stop here, just a clarification, because you may say, well, Melissa, but we do talk about those things. Like usually in the textbooks, you have the unit about the environment and you have some climate change topics and activities, and you talk about that in projects. That's great, and if you do that, that's great, and I encourage you to continue with that work. But what I'm saying is that that should not be the only thing we do, right? Global citizenship education entails other perspectives as well, other topics that are also as relevant as our environment, right? And the idea here, and what we're going to see in this session, is how we can embed, as the title says, these perspectives into the content that we have already usually in our curricula. Okay, how can I address food from a GCE perspective? How can I address clothes from a Gced perspective? In this case, from a social justice lens. Okay, that's what this is about. Good. So far, can you just say how you feel so far so that I don't feel that lonely? Okay. Thank you, Mariela. I was telling you before why global citizenship, why is it important to consider these concepts in our classes? And from my perspective, I think that we are more globally connected than we think. If you look at the map, if you look at the picture, I want you to take some minutes to think, to look at that, right? And when I say connection, I mean, think about your daily life, like resources. We use things that are not even produced here in Argentina, for example, right? That come from other places, China, Turkey, Colombia, right? Like connection in the sense of traveling, migration. Nowadays, we have a lot of communities migrating from one place to another one. Connection in the sense of the challenges we face. Sometimes we feel that we are the only ones facing a big economic crisis. Well, that's not true. Like, look at our neighbors, like look at other parts of the world. They're also having similar struggles. I'm not saying that we all have the same identical difficulties, but if you start exploring, you will see that there are a lot of points in common in many issues, right? So again, this idea that we are closer than we think we are, okay? And I think that it's super important that we bring that into our classroom, that we make our students see that, because this is a language class, right? And English should not, I think that and this is what this session is about, right? Like going beyond language skills. I'm not learning English just because I want to apply for a good job in my future. That could be a reason, but there should be something else. I'm learning a language because that that gives me another window to see the world, another perspective. I can hear another voice, another struggle, another challenge, right? And I can, by reflecting on someone else's struggles, I can also reflect on mine, and I can feel that empathy, right? That's the beauty for me of learning languages. And I think that if we don't show that in how we think our classes, that is not going to happen, right? Especially in these times, right? In which AI and ChatGPT seem to do everything. Well, then let's give our students a reason why they should come to our classes, right? Sorry, I get very passionate when I talk about this. So, with that being said, and thank you for those comments, I truly appreciate them. But I really want to, I cannot read all of them because I really want to have time to show you how this looks in practice, okay? So, as I said before, we're going to see some specific teaching sequences, okay, in which I show you how we can incorporate, right, this perspective into topics that we already deal with or we work with in our classes at different levels, okay? I'm going to show you, I guess I will have the time, 3 teaching sequences, and they are designed, each of them, for a specific level, okay, of English. Before that, I want to show you something. This is a roadmap that I'm working on right now in my project, in which what I offer is that when you think about, when you design your class, right? Okay, I have to teach food and I'm going to do it from this perspective. Okay, there are small stops, yes, that you have to do, right, with a specific focus on each of them to work on a specific objective. So that's why you see these 4 steps or stops as well. Okay, this if you follow them, this is the road that will take you to this to explore to fully explore global citizenship education. Okay. So let's start with the first one, the first teaching sequence. As you can see in the light blue square at the top, here I'm giving you the teaching context. Okay, so level, low, intermediate students, try to picture that type of class. The context, in this case, I have to teach, let's imagine that I have to teach food, right? Or daily life, like related to food and daily life, which is a common topic in ESL classes. But the perspective that I'm gonna add in this content is food hunger, okay? So I'm gonna try to see how can I explore that while exploring food, okay, with my students. And as you can see, it says source Feeding America. That's a website of it's Feeding America is a network of food banks in the United States. Okay. In this case, I decided to choose that one because I found the information super simple, and like if I'm thinking about low intermediate students, I have to think about that, right? If I'm using authentic sources. But this is up to the teacher, okay? Like I'm just giving you an example. And as you can see, the orange arrow, right, on the right, the theme that I'm working with is social justice and inequality, okay? In the middle, you see a question, right? And this is how I usually like to think about classes, right? Like, okay, I have the content, I have to teach all this, and I want to add this GCE perspective. I'm going to focus on food hunger. And from all that, I want to come up with a question, but a powerful question, okay? And that will guide me on where I want to take my students, okay? The question reads, how many people have access to food in the United States? What actions are taking place, okay? So once I have my question, then I'm going to start with the first stage, which is I have to find the input, okay? Because I am assuming that the material that I'm using right now doesn't have anything about that. So I need to find that on my own, okay? So in this case, I suggest using, as I said before, authentic websites or real-world facts to share in class, okay? What I did here, this will depend on your resources at the schools you work at, okay? If you have the possibility to use computers in the classroom and work with the website and show it and explore the website together with the students, that's great. If you don't have that option, well, maybe you can bring directly the facts, okay? Or you can do screenshots and bring copies to the students of the website so that they can get familiarized with what Feeding, in this case, Feeding a Risk organization is and what they do, okay? So what I'm bringing here is like very key information about what the organization does, right? So I'm gonna read just one of them. Approximately 48 million people in the US face hunger, including roughly 14 million children, okay? So this is the type of information you find on the website. And then they tell you about how they help the communities, okay? How the food banks work, the food banks work, their volunteers. They give you a lot of insights of how their work is, okay? So you can explore that with your students in the first step. In the second step, you can design comprehensive activities and critical thinking analysis, right? Like activities to foster critical thinking analysis, so that they can interact with that information critically, okay? So these are just examples. I can ask them some questions like, okay, explore the website or explore the organization and answer, like, what do they do? Who does it help? How do people help? Why is this organization important? Okay? And then here comes the connection with their own realities, okay? With their own context. So after discussing that or working with that, I'm gonna ask them, okay, what about in our own country or in our own city? Is food hunger an issue in our country? Are there any organizations like this? Have you ever thought if we have like food banks? Or what do we have? We have comedores. And how do they work? And right? So I start making that connection very visible for them. And I ask them to think. After that, I am in step number 3. I suggest doing some vocabulary focus. Okay, this is optional. This again depends on the group, your time, the lesson plan, your objectives. But I think that this is a good opportunity to teach different vocabulary. Okay, so what I mean by different vocabulary is words or terms that sometimes not necessarily appear on our textbooks, right? On that word list that we have, and that are very super rich, right? And that actually our students will need that vocabulary to explore the topics that we are asking them to explore, okay? So in this case, I can create my own list, right? Like hunger, food insecurity, help, donate, share, grow food, community, okay? And of course, here you can do a lot of activities. I imagine you are already experts on that. But this is a good moment to work on vocabulary too, right? And expand our vocabulary lists from the books that we use. And finally, we have the output stage. Yes, this moment in which we want our students to produce something, to do something with everything we've been doing before. What I suggest, this is just an idea, I suggest here doing a role play, okay? So students have to work in groups of 3, right? One is gonna be the journalist and the other ones are gonna be 2 volunteers from the organization, in this case, Feeding America, but it could be any other, or it could be one from Argentina, okay? So the journalists ask questions about food hunger, the organization's work, how people can help, okay? Of course, depending on the student's level, this will need more guidance, more scaffolding, right? And just presenting the idea, okay? And I wanna read that, which is very important. Why doing role-playing in this case? Because role-playing is a great exercise to help students develop empathy, okay? Because for that activity, I need to put myself in someone else's shoes. I have to understand their struggles, their needs, okay, how they feel, right? And I think that that's a very important skill that we need to foster more, okay? Empathy. I think that's what our world needs right now. So why? I think this is a great opportunity, a great space to do that when working with Gced. In the next one, in the next slide, you can see this is, I can even expand this idea and I can continue and I say, okay, now if I see that the group is super involved in the activity, in the organizations, in the food banks, I can ask them, okay, let's have our own project, right? And in a small group, design, now it's your turn to design your organization to address local or global problems. Like it could be food hunger, but it could, or any other one, right? Or we can do it after several topics that we have seen during our months, right? So again, this is to show you that I can go on and go on, and there are a lot of things to continue and cover and expand on, right? But I think that it is important to understand why we're doing it, right? It's not just a project, it's something else, okay? Okay, so far I see, okay, Luciana, love the ideas, thank you so much. Okay, Yes, of course. Okay, we're going to leave some, then I'm going to answer some questions in the last 15 minutes, okay? But thank you for, I'm glad that you like the ideas. Let's go with the second teaching sequence, okay? In this case, remember that we were talking about big cities before, right? So let's imagine that now we're working with intermediate students and the name of the unit is big cities, right? A good GCED topic could be gentrification, right? So again, from this social justice and inequality lens, I can come up with a question that reads, what impact does gentrification have on local communities, right? So, again, we go over the steps. The first step, I have to find the material, the sources that could work for my class, for my group, okay? That's gonna be up to the group and the class and the resources you have at school. But in this case, I suggest that working with articles could be a very good option, videos, or again, bringing real world facts and share them in class, okay? In this case, for example, I can clarify what the concept of gentrification is, okay? I can suppose that I'm working particularly on London, right? So gentrification in London means richer people move into poorer areas. Housing becomes more expensive. Some original residents may have to leave, okay? So that's the impact. I can also work with studies, like there are a lot of, about this topic in particular, there are a lot of graphics that show you, right, how the neighborhoods were impacted, right, by gentrification. So for example, researchers studied 53 neighborhoods that were low income in 2012, but became much richer in 2020, right? I can work with that information and bring it to my class, right? For the next stage, I'm going to do, again, activities to check comprehension, to ask students, so that students can interact with that, with all that information, right? So some examples, right? What is happening in this city, in this neighborhood? Why are housing prices increasing? Who, and this is super important, who benefits from these changes? Who might be negatively affected? Why is this situation controversial? Okay, so notice that by asking them to think who benefits and who is negatively affected, I'm helping them develop that critical analysis. Okay, I'm guiding them. Good. And then again, we have this question that asks them to find the connection with their own context, with their own cities, okay? So is gentrification a problem in your city or a county, right? So now I ask them to tell me, well, let's think about if you are in Buenos Aires, right? What do our citizens struggle with gentrification? Why, right? And again, I can expand a little bit, a lot on this. As the final stage, right, what I'm suggesting here is that students can write a letter of complaint, right? I know that we love letter of complaints because it's usually in all of our books. So let's ask them to do this, but this is the situation that we're going to give them. They will have to imagine that they are long-time residents of a neighborhood in London or New York City or any other city, right? Affected by rising rents and redevelopment. So they have to write a formal letter to the mayor expressing their concerns, okay? So the same as what we said about role-playing. Notice how we invite students to put themselves in the shoes of the people who are affected, right? And we encourage them also to raise their voices to address these issues, okay? We are planting those seeds, right? That when you see something that you consider unfair or that this is not what should be, you raise your voice, right? You give your opinion, you take action, right? You are, because you are an active global citizen, right? So this is, well, and again, this will need more scaffolding for some groups, not for some others might not, okay? This will need to be revised, okay? But this is just the idea, okay? Okay. Oh, thank you so much. I'm reading. I love the topics you come up with. Great ideas. Thank you. Okay, are we ready for the last one? I really want to have time for us to discuss a little bit about all this, and I want to hear your voices. So the last one is for upper intermediate, yes, students. I'm not going to tell you the grammar topic that we can work here because I'm going to ask you to think about that in a minute. But the GCED topic is going to be access to clean water, okay? In this case, the source that I chose is, I found it very, very, very useful. It's called Our World in Data. It's a website, and it has a lot of graphics, and it's, I think the way that information is presented is super, super clear, and that helps a lot, okay, especially for English classes. And notice, if you look at the arrows, we have two this time. We have social justice and inequality, and we have sustainable development, okay? So we can combine these two, right? That's also possible. We don't need to stick to just one thing. We can combine two things together. And the guiding question that I came up with reads, where do people lack access to clean water? Okay? In which part of the world and what type of, which countries, okay, are struggling with this? So, in this case, notice that we are not focusing on skills. I mean, not like reading or, well, we're working with reading, but I mean, the focus, as I said before, is we're going to use this material to focus on grammar or vocabulary topic, okay? So, first stage, again, how I look for, I found my website. I love the info. I think that is appropriate for my students' level, and I can use that, and I think that it's going to be useful for them. So once I have that, for example, I brought here a screenshot of a graphic that for me was super useful, in which in there you have the information of drinking water usage in 2024, okay? So you have like you have the percentages, like for example, you have the categories, safely managed water, basic, limited, unimproved, or no access to water at all. So in the first one, you have the world. 74% of the world has access to safely managed water, right? And then 18, basic. And then, well, there you cannot see the percentages, but for the rest, but you do have them in the website. So you see there is this portion that doesn't have access to water, right? And then you have the information for low-income countries. What's the situation there? Like how many, what percentage of countries have access to safely managed water, and right? So there is a lot to discuss in this picture. We had an interruption. Is that okay? There we go. Okay, so my question for you is, answer in the chat, please. Which grammar or vocabulary could be taught or explored using that material? What do you think? Let's see. Yes, the source is there below the chart. Which the source, okay. What do you think about comparatives? Thank you, Maria Fernanda. Okay. Conditional, okay. Let's see, modals, okay, good. Yes, Carolina, we're gonna talk about that, of course. Flipped classroom, if you have the chance, that would be great. You can ask the students to do that before. Comparatives and superlative, tenses. Yes, a lot of you, if you are creative, a lot of things can be done with this material, with this, using this source, okay? Just for the sake of time, I'm gonna show you what I thought, but this is not the only option, okay? So notice that here I can use it to practice comparatives, as some of you said. So I can ask the students, look at the chart and write down one piece of information that surprises you, right? One comparison showing equality and one contrast, okay? So they have to come up with these sentences, but I think that the best thing here is that they are working with real data, okay? It's not something random that they cannot make any connection, that they don't find it meaningful, right? This is real data, right? They are engaging with real authentic information, okay? So here you have some examples, right? For example, for the last one, the contrast, high-income countries have much higher access to safely managed water than low-income countries, okay? So again, in the last, I can use that to work with grammar, and I can come up with questions, right, for discussion, right? Should governments guarantee access to safely managed water? What happens when water becomes a business instead of a public service, right? This can lead to very rich discussions, okay? So again, a lot of very rich info to work with in written productions or oral discussions. So with that being said, I want to read something to you. I'm sorry it's a little bit long, but I found it very powerful, and I want to share it with you, and I hope you find it powerful too. And it says, good education is more than an entry point into the job market. Education has the power to transform people and bring shared values to life. In the face of global pandemics, conflict, climate change, and economic turmoil, it is clear we sink or we swim together. We must forge a new way of relating to each other as individuals, communities, and countries. Education can cultivate in us a vision that sees beyond one's immediate interest to the world at large. It can give us a profound understanding that we are tied together as citizens of global community, and that our challenges are interconnected. Okay. I hope you like it. I wanted to finish this presentation with that message. And I would like you, as an exit ticket, I would like you to choose one word, or it doesn't need to be one word, concept, a sentence, a phrase that represents your main takeaway from today's session. And I'm very excited to read your comments. Love that fragment. Thank you, Carolina. Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Very powerful, instructive, empathy. Nice. Wonderful food for thought. Citizenship. Great. Yes. Inspired. Empathy. Thank you, Romina. Different. Oh, I like that word. Solidarity. Going beyond. Yes. That's what this is about. Empathy, contribution, empathy. Inspiring. Thanks. Javier, he wrote, together we stand, divided we fall. Wow, Pink Floyd would sing. Yes, thank you for that. Awareness. I love that word. Yes, inspiring, empathy. powerful, inspires, empathy, love, insightful, connection, shake our minds. Wow, that was idea. Awareness, connection, insightful. Thanks so much. Thinking about our world, exactly. Powerful, relevance, meaningful, thought-provoking. Okay, good. We learn when we find it relevant. Exactly. Yes. Awareness, food for thought, empathy. Thank you, Sabrina. Empathy, transformation. Yes.
Okay, so I know answers keep coming in the chat, and this
Yes.
is such a nice moment, but I'm going to
Yes, of course.
wrap it up and be the timing police a little bit. I'd like to say, for me, that the word is necessary. All this is necessary. It's not just something that it's a nice thing to do, a nice project to have every now and again. It's part of our responsibility as educators to raise this awareness, empower learners to take action in the real world. It's a big challenge, but it is necessary.
Yes, thank you.
Melissa, can we see the last slide with your contact details in case people want to connect with you?
Yes.
So that's where you can find her. And I'm going to invite the audience to leave their questions or comments in the chat. I have earmarked a couple that came up during the presentation, but if you have others, we would love to read them and discuss. So some of the questions, Melissa, had to do with the idea of the level of the students. And when we were comparing Mary and Noelia's classes, lots of people said number 2 was more interesting, more engaging, but also more challenging. And one of the comments here from Marcy in the chat says, this is very interesting. But although you can always adapt material, perhaps this is more suitable for B1 plus levels. Is this something you agree with, or have you tried this with an A2 level?
Yes, and you know what I think? It all depends on what we ask students to produce, right? Like as we know, we know that students usually find it harder when they have to produce something, right? It could be written form or oral, right? Than when they have to read, right? And usually reading comprehension, from what we can hear from students and our own experiences, seem to be easier, right, as a skill. So in terms of, I think that everything is adaptable. When it comes to the example from the very beginning, right, notice that I asked the students to read, right, that second part of the text, and I don't ask them to, okay, now let's discuss about what you think. It's not that I go directly there, right? I ask them to first, I want to check what they understood, right? So that's why they're going to design that poster in which they're going to show me by using graphic symbols, right? They're going to show me what they understood from that input, okay? It would be completely different if I say, okay, read the text and now tell me, summarize the idea. Then if I know that my students are going to struggle a little bit with that, it's going to be more complex, right? It's more demanding, right, cognitively speaking. So I think it all, of course, as I said before, it all depends on the groups, on your level. You are the ones who know your groups. But I think we can always do something in the activity that we ask students to do to reduce that, right, that complexity. I think I personally believe that not knowing how shouldn't prevent us from trying it. No?
Absolutely.
So, yes, yes and no. I mean, I have tried it, and there are some groups that it works better than with other ones, right? But I think that by the end of the day, it's the only way is try it, and if it didn't work, then okay, for the next one, probably I will have to think about that, no, better, or see which other thing I can ask instead of that activity, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. And it's about thinking and choosing carefully and being clever about what kind of inputs you're going to choose, what kind of outputs you're going to design. Some of the inputs that you showed today, like, for example, the graph on water usage, there was no language there.
There
So
was no
that could be
language.
understood by an elementary, perhaps, yes, older student, not a 6-year-old child, but yes, an elementary 14-year-old without much language. Of course, if you're going to ask them to write a letter of complaint, then yes, perhaps you need a higher level group.
Exactly.
Roxana in the chat says, how often can you do this kind of projects in a school year?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I would like to say is that I personally, I'm going to answer that from my experience. I am someone who sometimes get very passionate, as you can see, on this topic. So I'm very ambitious, and I want to do everything, and I do this activity and then the project, and by the end of the day, or by the end of the week, or by the end of the year, I get super exhausted, and that's not the idea, okay? Because I know we already have a lot to go through. So what I would suggest is, especially like these type of topics, is let's take small steps, okay? Maybe the first year we're working with this unit on food. Okay, how can I integrate something, right, related to global citizenship education? I don't know, one of the things that we have just seen, and maybe it's just one activity, or maybe it's just one question, and that question, but I'm doing it, and I'm taking the time to develop that critical thinking, that analysis, and maybe next unit is going to be something else. It's going to be a question and also a mini project, right? Like, those small steps, like not trying to do everything in all the units with all the topics, right? I don't think that that's feasible, right? To be honest, I think I see it more as something like getting the training, right, of how we are thinking these topics, right? So yes, what you have just seen, I try to give you different ideas, that variety, but I'm not suggesting that you have to do everything like that, all the steps, right? I think that starting with just something very small works perfectly.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be like a fully fledged 3-month project with a big output where students have to build, I don't know, a pet shelter, but it can be smaller things. It can be things that come up in conversation. It can be smaller interventions as well.
Exactly. That's idea. Yes.
Very good. I don't know if we have, yes.
Amarila, sorry, I want to add something else now that I'm really in connection to your question, and maybe this also is interesting to our people that are listening to the presentation. That we something that Gced emphasizes is that this doesn't mean that we have to know, teachers, we have to be the experts who know a lot about all these topics, right? This is not the idea, because it can also be, right, it can also be true that I say, well, I don't know a lot about gentrification, and like I don't have the time to do all that research, and that's okay, and that's not the point, right? The idea is that we bring the topic, and then we talk to our students and say, like, what? Okay, I'm not an expert on this. I'm gonna learn as you do at the same time. We're gonna discover this together, and I think that that's also what makes it real, right? And this idea that we're learning this together, right? And if sometimes the students ask something and we don't know, and that's okay. Okay, we're gonna find it out, right? But that this idea, like we have to know everything and all the topics, I don't think that matches this approach.
Yes, it's not realistic.
Not for
No, I was just thinking in terms of also supporting lower level learners. On Monday, we had a session with Maria Alejandra Mareco, and we talked about CLIL and using a CLIL framework. And something that is happening a lot and that came up in this conversation was the idea that nowadays in many of the provinces in Argentina, teachers find themselves with shared spaces with teachers of other subjects. So it would be, I think, interesting, useful to explore the possibility to perhaps, if you're working with statistics on a topic, you can work with the math teacher to do some of the heavy lifting. And then perhaps your language discussion is just using comparative superlatives, the easier thing language wise. You can work with geography teachers, you can work with economic teachers in secondary. It'd be interesting to also bring other subjects into the conversation.
Exactly, exactly. The famous ABP, right? Aprendizaje basado en proyectos, project-based project-based learning, right? Yeah. I think I totally agree with you. I think that's great.
This is a very good segue into our next sessions of the day. So I'm going to give you one last question because we talked a little bit about scaffolding. And you mentioned when you were showing some of the sample activities that you had come up with, the idea of role play and how enriching this can be to develop empathy. So what kind of scaffolding can we provide to lower level learners if we want to have them perhaps in a role play activity, which is speaking, and that's always a bit more challenging. And so they might need a bit more support.
Exactly, yes. So, for example, in the case of the role play I was presenting, which was a conversation interview, well, then I would suggest let's work first with the formats, right, of an interview. How is it like? How is it the introduction of an interview? What happens like during the interview? How do I end an interview? Like fixed phrases, right? So the more exposed students are to these formats, right, and to this discourse before, the better, right? I am preparing them little by little to eventually be able to engage in a role play, an interview, right, with my activity.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so exposure, like maybe like fixed phrases, having them time to prepare beforehand, right? I'm not going to ask you, okay, like you have 3 minutes to come up with the interview, right? They can have in pairs, they can prepare the questions, right? I can work on grammar, on vocabulary, what can I ask? They can practice, and then I'm going to give them time to do some rehearsal, and then I'm going to ask them to see if they would like to show to the class, like different strategies so that we try not to, this doesn't happen like from one moment to another one in the class, right? There is a lot to do in between, right?
Yes, absolutely. Whenever we talk about projects, we sometimes think of the end product, but we don't think about what would go into the day-to-day of how you would support learners to get there. So these are great examples. We talked about this on Monday as well with Pilar and this idea of providing sentence frames, providing sentence starters, also using different types of dynamic, like working in pairs first and having preparation time, and then having to present something to the whole class or to their teacher. So this is all very interlinked.
Yes, everything is connected.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to thank you so much, Melissa. This has been very inspiring, and I hope teachers take this into their new school year and at least try to, if you haven't, to start because it's really what we need to be doing, especially these days in the world.
Yeah. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you. And we will continue with ELT Week, day 3. We have 2 more presentations today. We have 2 shorter sessions, but before we go on to our next session, we are going to take a very short break. So I will see you back here in around 5 minutes, maybe a few minutes less. So don't go anywhere. Thank you. Welcome back. So I'm so happy to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker today is Nathalie Solange Correa Rivero. Nathalie is an English language teacher from San Juan in Argentina. She obtained her teaching degree in 2019 from Universidad Nacional de San Juan, where she's currently pursuing a master's degree in inclusive education. She works both in primary and secondary schools, focusing on promoting meaningful English learning experiences. And her research interests include didactics, language learning in children with speech difficulties, and the relationship between mother tongue and second language learning. So we will see a very inspiring and creative project that demonstrates that there are different ways to support inclusion and language learning. So welcome, Nathalie.
Thank you very much. I am so happy to be here with you today. Well, my name is Natalie, and the title of my presentation is A Healthy Breakfast by Little YouTubers. Well, the plan is as follows. First, I will describe the context and the participants. Then I will explain to you what Universal Design for Learning is. After that, I will tell you how a traditional final exam turned into an innovative assessment. And finally, I will share with you some suggestions since the school year is about to begin. Well, let's continue. Well, where and when did the project take place? The project was carried out at Escuela Normal Superior General Belgrano in Gced in San Juan. Gced is a district that is 30 kilometers away from San Juan City. And the school is a public school. The participants were 90 children. All of them were first grade students divided into 3 classes, primero primera, primero segunda, and primero cuarta. And it's important to highlight that they had English lessons twice a week. At least in San Juan, no, the previous one, please. At least in San Juan, first and second grade are considered a single pedagogical unit, also known as unidad pedagógica. What happens here? In English classes and Spanish classes in first grade, children start to recognize some words, mainly cognates, and words that are familiar to them. Since they don't know how to read or write, they recognize some letters, vowels, consonants, and they start to make connections between the 2 languages. They start in first grade, and then they strengthen their reading and writing abilities in second grade. So both languages follow the same path. At least in English, reading and writing are not formal. Reading and writing are not asked. However, listening and speaking are focused. Well, now let's go on. So, who were the participants' characteristics? Who were my YouTubers? It's important to say that children between 5 and 7 years old show stronger gross and fine motor skills. Cognitively speaking, they think more logically about concrete events, and problem-solving skills initiate at this stage. How about language? Language is more complex and the vocabulary is richer. They can produce longer sentences, and my favorite part is that they do enjoy role-playing and storytelling. Keeping in mind that I had 90 students and my classes were so heterogeneous, I noticed that 15 of my students require some adjustment during English lessons. This is because some of them were autistic, one of them was blind, some others have speech difficulties, among other conditions. So this is where UDL, Universal Design for Learning, takes place. Let's continue with this idea. Have you ever heard about Universal Design for Learning? Please tell me in the comments. Well, let's go on. Universal Design for Learning is a pedagogical approach where teaching and learning are optimized. It's important to say that the focus is not on the barriers, but on how the children can get involved in the knowledge, right? So, Universal Design for Learning proposes that all students should have multiple opportunities to engage with content, then various ways to access to information, and then a numerous ways to demonstrate they are learning. So, this approach is meaningful and very useful when working with children, since they love storytelling and they love role playing. So I focused on what did my students need. Sorry, on what my students needed. Since they are so little, they tend to be noisy, they tend to move constantly. So a traditional final exam would not work for them at all. Well, let's continue. So how did I create the project? So since classes were about to finish and we had to take a final exam, I thought that matching exercise or a drawing and painting activity would not be enough or wouldn't be meaningful for them. So the topic was food, and I proposed to the head teacher and the parents that they have the possibility of carrying out their final assessment at home. How? By recording a short video at home in no more than 30 seconds. And they had to mention their names, that they are what was their food, milk, cookies, bread, the color and the shape. In the third bullet, it's mostly the whole program or the syllabus is included, right? And the sentences they had to produce were, I have cookies, the cookies are brown and round, or the bread is small, something like that. But they had to produce short sentences so they could integrate all the concepts. So let's pass on to the other slide, please. So how was it scaffolded over 3 lessons? So keeping in mind the Universal Design for Learning, we worked with keywords and expressions through pictures and songs. For example, have you ever heard of the song about Macarena? Baila tu cuerpo alegría Macarena? Well, using that movement was the possibility, that movement or that dance helped me to teach my students and remember how to introduce themselves. I am Juancito. I am 6, for example. Among other songs that I use with them, those resources let me introduce my students to the speaking activity. So we have meaningful learning experiences apart from matching the name of the food, milk, with a small box of milk. Apart from doing that, we visited the school buffet and we classified some of the dishes that were there. For example, let's suppose that there was pasta frolla on a plate. So, is pasta frolla healthy or unhealthy? Are chisitos healthy or unhealthy? Is pizza healthy or unhealthy? So, all the children had to produce their answers based on real food and not just on the picture. After that, we activated knowledge and planning, so Spanish was allowed, and the questions were, ¿y qué hace un youtuber? ¿Y cómo abre un video? ¿Y cómo cierra un video? ¿Qué usa un youtuber? I wrote all the questions on the board, and they gave me the answer in Spanish. So in that way, we could make connections with the final task. Then we watched a sample video created by me on how they had to carry out the task. And also they could choose props like sunglasses, hats, or even their pets. So it was really nice since they had the possibility of choosing all the elements that they wanted to share. It was their creation, so they were free to do whatever they wanted. Keeping in mind, of course, all the things taught and asked. So let's watch the video.
How are you? Good morning, teacher. I am Ariane. In the morning, I have tea, my favorite cap with the red and silver and brown. The water is yellow and rectangle.
Okay, so she was lovely. Well, although it was a funny and an innovative final assessment, I had to evaluate their work. So I created this rubric where it was divided into 3, and the criteria were if they could say or know their name, if they could mention the food with using small sentences or short sentences, and if the student could recognize shapes and colors. So if they did it well, they got 3 points in each criterion. So if they would achieve all the prompts, okay, so they got a 10, which is called during unidad pedagógica, logrado con autonomía. If it was more or less done, they got logrado, just that. And if they couldn't provide the answers, okay, so it was no logrado, and they had to carry out the task again. Well, it was great because students had a good time. They didn't have the pressure or feel the pressure of completing a task at school. They could do it at their own rhythm at home. So let's change the slide, please. So would you be able to implement a similar project in your class? Tell me in the comments. What will be the suggestion if you want to carry out this project at your school, but you don't have internet connection, but perhaps students' parents don't help you? I think that you can carry out the project by using props. I don't know, toys, sunglasses, teddy bears, or shoes, or caps. So students can practice or act or tell a story during your class, so that you can evaluate their product. You can create a very short play where one is the streamer, the other is the cameraman, or the other is a journalist. I don't know, but the thing is that you should wear or use toys, some things that are familiar to them. So in that way, students can enjoy their work, and you can evaluate without causing stress or anxiety on your students. Well, that will be all. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you so very much, Natalie. I think we're melting with the video of your student. I wish we could see all the videos.
You see,
But we have,
she is so cute.
was that one, would you say that was one of the best videos or the top performing students, or was that more or less what everybody produced?
She got a 10. She got a 10. Well, the criteria that I had, perhaps if the student had a speech difficulty, or if the student had the student I had, which is blind. So I focused on the fact that he or she could recognize the object based on his or her abilities, based on their context and their fingers, of course. Hands are really important, more than voice, more than eyes, fingers. Children need to explore the world, and they have to communicate through those senses.
Absolutely. And some of the things that you mentioned, introducing this idea of universal design for learning, and showing learners different ways to engage with content and with language, whether it is through a song, through a picture, through written words, through bringing them to the cafeteria and showing them food that they can name or point to. This is a fantastic example of something that we can do at a very low level. I think one of the comments in the chat that we got from Lucia is that it's great that this session has to do with specifically content for teaching children that sometimes we don't get a lot of. And I think perhaps this is connected to the fact that historically, most of us have been trained as teachers for secondary. English used to be taught more widespread in secondary, and it's only nowadays that maybe we have in state schools English in first grade, in second grade. So we need to start thinking about these children and how to reach them.
Exactly. At least at Escuela Normal Belgrano in Caucete, children have English lessons from kindergarten, salita de cinco. So they start there. So we move on till secondary school. So it's a great way to work with children, to explore their creativity, so that they can to foster imagination, foster creativity. But I do know that technology sometimes is not something that we can reach easily. But I think that we can also we can carry out the project, I don't know, using traditional dishes, or mainly using pictures. Something very simple. We as teachers can bring pictures, and one of them is the presenter, the other is the cameraman. So the idea is to foster their creativity, to help them to work with their potential. It's not something like repeating the book. Repeating books nowadays are awful. However, there are methodologies that accept that idea. But if we can change children's minds, then we can go further.
And there are so many interesting spin-offs from your project in the chat that people are suggesting. One of our teachers, Selina, mentions they did this during the pandemic when they were having online lessons, and regrets not having done it again. And I think a lot of these more creative ideas came up during the pandemic because we had to. And then we went back to our normal lessons with our textbook. So why not revisit some of those? Vanessa in the chat says you can do this with clothes as well, and perhaps have a parade. Roxana mentions you can do the same with rooms, furniture in their houses. So there are so many topics that we usually teach in primary where you can adapt this idea of having them record something, produce something.
Exactly. With respect to the question about dyslexia, one of my students had dyslexia. So what my student did was taking let's suppose this is a cup. So cup, and their word was written on the object. So he looked at the camera and said, my cup, my cup. Very short words, very simple, something that is closely connected with them so that they can produce. I didn't want them to repeat words that are far-fetched from them, since they really don't know. So I thought of them with working with something familiar. Familiarity is the kicking point with working with children.
Absolutely. And Carmen in the chat also mentions she did something similar to this, but with students cooking breakfast and explaining.
Oh, such a great experience.
Right, absolutely. So everybody can think in the chat how they would adapt this project to a different level, to a different age group. I have seen comments in the chat from teachers who work with adults, and I wouldn't rule this out completely. So there is so many ways in which we can take the ideas from your session, Natalie, and think about adapting them to our levels, to our groups. Marce suggests making chocotorta. That's a good recipe to demonstrate. But yes, Leila mentions you can take this as a framework and change the topic. So absolutely. And we talked a lot about what is feasible. But sometimes we are scared by these ideas of project work or doing things that are outside the pages of our book. And this sounds like something that you can actually implement in a realistic way.
Exactly.
Marce says, sorry to ask this, but do you show the videos to the other students in the group? So no. I suppose the parents sent you the video.
No. That when I sent, that was something like that. First of all, I asked to the head teacher if he agreed with me so as to carry out the project. Then I talked to the parents, so I sticked notita on their English notebook. So I told parents that I was the sole person who watched the videos. No one else could get access to those videos since they were children. It was their private life. So, and it was just an activity for the English lesson. Just that.
Yes, let's not have silly ideas like uploading it to YouTube for real. That's like not safeguarding friendly. Yes, perhaps with a different type of project, or if students work in groups to produce a video, then maybe in the class you can have a moment where you can have peer feedback. People can watch other students' videos within the group, maybe in an open class with parents, but that's as far as I would go with the sharing of the videos.
Yeah, exactly.
Marga in the chat mentions she did something similar with school objects, pencils, books, and all the things on their desk. So there are so many ideas deriving from this presentation. All right. So I think, Natalie, we don't have a whole lot of questions, just general appreciation for your enthusiasm and your great ideas. And there's also a lot of side conversation about what dishes people can prepare for their videos.
Yeah. I mean, with respect to one of the comments based on audios, yes, I could record audios. However, I thought that it wouldn't feel like comfortable, since it's like using your phone and just that. And where is the experience? Where the experience is? I don't know, eating your I don't know, having your hierbiado with semitas next to your pet, and it will be, children love acting and storytelling. So instead of only using their voices, I decided to work on their everyday situations. So that was a way of making the exam funnier and easier and feasible for them. I didn't want to feel stressed since they are so little and so young, and I want them to feel English as a good experience, not as a torture.
Absolutely. And also to give them this sense of achievement, of having a tangible end product that they can watch, that they can share with their family, that they can be proud of. Children love seeing themselves. I mean, I have a 5-year-old, and every time I take a picture, he comes over and it's like, okay, can I see the picture? Or if he does something funny that I'm taking video, he wants to watch the video. So this is also good for their self-esteem, and for them to have a product at the end of the day that they can boast about.
Exactly, I completely agree. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure for me.
For us as well, I think the chat agrees. So thank you, Natalie, for being a part of ELT Week today. And we are going to move on to our next presentation in after a short break. So stay tuned, and we'll be back in just 5 minutes. Thank you, Natalie.
Bye. Bye-bye.
All right, welcome back. So we're going to continue with our program. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker for the day and our very last one today, Marina Gentile. Marina is an English teacher and translator based in Buenos Aires, in Argentina as well. And with over 8 years of experience in bilingual education, she currently teaches 5th grade in private schools and works with students and professionals around the world. She's highly versatile, and over the years, she has been deeply involved in international exam training and contributed to teacher guidance and academic coordination. She's currently a master's student in education with strong interest in neurodivergence and language learning. And today, she will be sharing an inspiring project, also a project-based learning initiative developed with her 5th grade students, showing how young learners can grow into confident communicators, creators, and critical thinkers. So welcome, Marina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you, Mariela. It is a real privilege to be a part of ELT Week. And I would like to know where you are from. Feel free to write in the chat box. I'm going to check all the comments as you write it. Thank you very much for writing. Oh, I see many, many people. Beautiful, beautiful. So today I'd like to share a classroom-based project that is developed with a group of 10 to 11-year-old learners with an A2 level of English. And this project was amazing because it involved the creation of a simulated TV news program, which was fully written and fully presented by them. And what I would like you to keep in mind throughout this talk is that this project is not about technology or maybe the latest devices, right? It's about using English for a real purpose. So now, let me start by giving you some context, right? This project was implemented with young learners who had already reached an A2 level of English and were ready to move beyond controlled practice. And as the vocabulary contents that were related to mass media, for example, television, newspapers, etc., were all part of the curriculum, I worked together with a colleague to develop this project as a way to share with them, with the kids, and to apply what we had explored in class. So it was like a mixed course project, which made it even more amazing. This meant that we had limited time, but we also had clear objectives and real constraints. I mean, just like most of our classrooms, right? The main goal was simple and also consistent. We had to help students use the English that they already knew at that time, but not just study it, but like to use it for real life matters, right? So the elements that were involved were the scheduling, the guided writing prompts, and the slide design model. In this case, we used a digital environment, let's say, so that the students could create and develop the slides. But we are going to see shortly that we can also develop this project in a paper-based way. So that's why I tell you to keep in mind, don't worry about the digital tools that I mentioned here, because they are not the only ones that maybe you can use. As I was telling you, the elements that were involved were the scheduling, the guided writing prompts, and the slide design models. In this sense, we used some digital websites that were made available by our school, and that made it super easier for the kids to use their own credentials, let's say, And in this sense, that's why I'm telling you, it's not that this project is only going to be made in this digital way, because we can have it made in a paper-based approach, or even inside the classroom, or it can be, for example, as an open class project as well, maybe inviting families over and so on. So let's go then with the next slide. So we had the topics, right? I would like you to take a look at the topics that we had in mind when it came to thinking about, okay, so how can we make a TV news program that is, in a sense, appealing for almost teenagers? So we said, okay, maybe we can use entertainment and sports. We could use the travel and holidays. We could use topics related to food, technology, environment, etc. So tell me in the chat or in the comments. So would your students enjoy simulating a real TV news show? What do you think? And would your students enjoy working with the previous topics? Entertainment, maybe artificial intelligence, or sports? I would like to read your comments. So let's go then with the next slide. We can use their favorite singers, says Melissa. Sports, I love it, Romina. There are many people saying, yes, you can use it. Yes, I think so. Absolutely, says Cecilia. I love it. I love it. So, even before starting, students already knew what a news program looked like, right? There was a presenter, there were different sections, and there is a clear audience that is intended, right? There was a schedule in mind. So this familiarity, as the previous speaker said, reduced anxiety on them. And that's especially important when we work with young learners, right? So there were guided prompts. And in this sense, what we did with the scheduling was that in the first 2 weeks, we could explore the topics. They had moments in class where they could brainstorm together and say, okay, what are the topics that we could explore maybe further? Or even if some of them had heard or seen on TV with their families, if there was any topic that was interesting for them, they could use it as well. And in this sense, this is where the guidelines on paper were super useful. I'm going to show it to you in just a minute. These guidelines were super useful for them because they could write and rewrite some of the drafts of the information that they wanted to share, right? So by the end of week number 2, they all had their final written version. Let's take a look at the writing prompt structure. So in this sense, the topic, in this case, in this example, was about travel, right? About traveling. The objective, which was at the beginning of the writing prompt, said, create a commercial for an activity in a specific destination. So in this sense, we teachers decided to give them the idea of, okay, you can create your own, we can appeal to your own mind and say, what do you think is like the greatest adventure or the greatest activity that you would like to do in a specific destination of your liking, right? So we said, okay, we can have a space in class where you could brainstorm some ideas related to that. For example, the characteristics of that place or the activities, how to catch the viewer's attention, maybe having some hooks, for example, and what was the main idea that they wanted to share and what were the supporting details. Let's take a look at the following parts of the prompt. So we had, for example, the functions to include value judgments. I like it, I don't like it, maybe it's the best one, right? Describing with the senses, using some vocabulary units that they thought that were related to their own experience, right? Giving advice with commands or maybe using predictions, etc. So this was all a checklist that my colleague and I decided to provide them in a way to guide the experience, right? What do you think about this? Would you like to share in the comments? Would you do something like this? Yes, I see a comment here that says, for example, most of the time they feel insecure when speaking aloud in front of the class. Exactly. That is why we thought that this instance of maybe writing it down and thinking it thoroughly could be a way for them to, to gain confidence, right? Excellent. So the writing prompt had a grammar focus, or maybe a couple or a group of grammatical topics that we wanted to deal with. We had the scaffolding, which is, of course, as you know, teacher support and step-by-step guidance, meaning that all of the kids had a moment to share with us their ideas and maybe some changes that they would like to make. And then the feedback towards goals, right? So, for example, we would have a moment to tell them, okay, why don't you think about maybe rewriting this into this objective? Or how can you make these two sentences be only in one structure, right? So it was an experience that I believe was made of growth for everyone, because we all could have like the lens or the like the point of view from the children and from us as teachers. We constantly learned from each other, and that was great. What do you think? Are these objectives useful for your students? You can type A or you can type B if you feel that these objectives are maybe above level for your current courses. So maybe you could adapt or change them. What do you think? A, B? Oh, I can see some comments here. B, for example, these are above level. I love it because it means that A, for example, I love it because everyone is going to have a different point of view. And what is super important is that this kind of project is scalable. You can change or adapt as many things as you want or as you need to have your students feel comfortable, right? Depending on the group, says Melissa. Right, amazing. Thank you very much for your comments. It's beautiful to read you. Super exciting. So let's go then into the next slide. Scheduling. What happens with the schedule, right? So by week number 3, we had a time to record in class, meaning that the families and the school were, of course, they all made a notice, and we all sent by the communication copybooks the permission, right? Asking for the families for them to be recorded. And in this sense, when we had all of the certifications from the families, we proceeded into recording them, right? And of course, it is not something that has to be done, I mean, as in yes or yes, right? It's not mandatory, right? So in this sense, for example, if you don't want or if you don't have that approach of recording the children, or if it's too complicated and maybe it's better to have like a face-to-face approach, you can have this kind of project made inside the classroom or in front of the families, right? And also between the courses, right? Maybe one course can present the TV show in front of the following courses and so on. So our focus here was pronunciation and fluency. And why is this? Because they all had time to focus on grammar and to focus on the structures, but of course they were nervous. So we had to make sure that they knew where were the specific steps to follow in order to improve their fluency and their pronunciation, right? So then after finishing this step, they all had the permission to start with a digital edition of their slides. So I'm going to briefly show you which was the model or the the example that was given to them to start designing their slides. So what we did was to make as if it were a PowerPoint file, let's say. Each kid was in charge of designing their own slide, meaning that there was, of course, some instances in which, for example, they wanted to check on maybe another peer's work and etc. So we always insisted on this, right? You have to stay in your own slide and you have to only work in your project. Okay, so all of the combinations of the slides together made the production feasible in this sense. So we had the structure of 2 pictures, a background, the topic title at the beginning, and then there was a space for them to leave empty because there would go the video of each kid, the recording of each kid telling the news of the writing that they had done before. So in this sense, it said, for example, this is one real example from a kid. The title was New Cleaning Robots in the World. He included the background that was combining with the images, and he also added 2 images of robots cleaning houses. Because why is it that he chose this? Well, because he came to class and he said, okay, I was watching the TV with my family and I saw that there were little robots that could clean houses, right? So he was astonished by that. And he said, maybe I can investigate more about other robots. And what he did was to think about, okay, is it any possibility that maybe there are other robots, maybe bigger robots that clean houses? And as we didn't get, of course, real images, he insisted on including this because he was super excited. So we said, okay, of course, in a space where it was safe for us to investigate and to create an image with a DALL-E, which is another possibility of using ChatGPT in this sense, we used a specific prompt to create 2 images. And he included those images into the slides. Let's go then into the next slide. Something that was really important here is that during this project, we also had the opportunity to deal with digital citizenship topics, which also made it like an integral part of working with devices. Because as we all know, digital citizenship is essential when it comes to using tools with anybody, actually, not only with kids or teenagers, but also it is their right to know what do we mean by digital citizenship, what is security, how can we use our data, right? It is essential that they could also get to discover ways to use securely, of course, safely, how to use these tools in order for them to work properly. So by week number 4, we had already made like 75% of this project. So basically, we had the instance of the revision of the slides. I could go about all of the slides and check maybe some details on the editing and so on. And we had a moment to watch the final project in class. This project was also sent to the families, and I mean, not only was it a project that involved a lot of energy from the kids, but also from the families, because they were intrigued by this. It was like, how can we collaborate on this? Because it seems like a super complex project, but they are super engaged with it. So there were some families that maybe wanted to share the video to maybe the siblings, and maybe younger siblings. And then we had the idea of showing the video to other grades in the school. And this made it even more exciting because we had the opportunity to see the little kids' faces, right? While they were watching some of the let's say the oldest kids in primary school be a part of a TV news program. So as closure, they all shared their point of view as the audience. What were the outcomes? Well, basically the engagement. They all felt more confidence by the end of this project, and they also felt the ownership of their own material. The most important thing was that they felt that all of the information they wanted to share was super important to them. And that was like the final goal in the end. What are some low resource alternatives or paper-based alternatives that we can use instead of using digital ways or maybe devices? We can use some cue cards, we can use posters, right? If there are maybe some kids that are a little bit ashamed or afraid of maybe expressing themselves because maybe they don't feel like it, some of these kids can also work on decorating the scenes, right? I had some kids that, for example, didn't want to share some ideas, or maybe they didn't want to make a news report or an interview, but they wanted to make the commercials or the advertisements. So in that sense, they all participated, and it was completely made by them. It can also be a class newspaper. Instead of being it a TV news program, it can be a newspaper that can be shared with other grades. What are some practical adaptations for lower levels? Well, in this sense, for example, they can make shorter scripts. There can be sentence frames. There could be group speaking. Maybe each kid can have a division of each part of the writing, and they can also have visual support. This was super important. So what are some key takeaways that I would like to take? I would like you to take from this. Number one is that clear structure allows for possibility. In this sense, if this project, or maybe any project, is approached by a clear structure, that is what essentially makes the kids feel confident, and that leaves room for everybody to work with the best of the intentions. Then that scaffolding is even more important than tools, because if there is a structure, there is a scaffolding, and if there is a scaffolding, there is always a space for the teachers to work collaboratively with the kids. And this creates a sense of commitment that is general, right? And also that this kind of project can be scaled up or down across levels. So to be closing, let's say, I would like to read you in the chat or in the comments, were these ideas useful for you? And do you prefer a digital or a paper-based approach? I would love to read your comments. Monica Gutierrez says, could it be possible for an open class? Definitely. Antonella says, If we talk about a video or recording, why do we need a presentation, 2 pics, and a title? Because the idea is that in the slides, each kid had the possibility to decorate, let's say, the background of the report or the interview that they were trying to make. So the idea was that all of the slides together, that obviously they have like a duration or a time, they could all get together, and with the combination of all of the slides, we could have a final video, and that is the program. That is why they had the slides as backgrounds and their video as the voice or themselves being, let's say, the protagonist, the main characters of the reports, and then that collaborated as the voice, of course, and the story that they wanted to tell. So thank you for your comments. How can I adapt this activity for kids with a beginner level? Well, as I'm going to go back to the slides, what are some practical adaptations that we can make? Well, maybe instead of having brainstorming on or like a criteria, a grammatical criteria that is shared with them so that they can decide, for example, if they use the present simple or the past simple or the past continuous or whatever grammatical topic, that structure can be provided to them in advance. So, for example, if this is a part of, let's say, if you're working with food and you would like to make a TV news program about healthy habits, maybe some of the kids can mention using some guided prompts or some sentence frames how to work with that specific grammatical approach. So, for example, they can write or they can say or they can be recorded, of course, with permission. They can say 5 sentences, for example, using the present simple. I eat bananas every day. Or I always have my breakfast. I always have breakfast at 7 a.m. in the morning, for example. I'm making it up, right? But that is the idea. You can provide any kind of grammatical point or structure in order for them to, to have their own, proposals as well. We believe that they all had something to share and to learn, and we as teachers are in charge of listening to their great minds, their beautiful minds. And of course, we had a moment with all of the kids, and they shared, for example, what were the things that made them feel excited about telling some other ideas, or maybe that they were a little bit afraid of sharing. And at the end of the session, what we could agree with my colleague is that everybody was super engaged at their own pace and with the contents that they wanted. And in the end, they all used English for a real purpose. And we were super happy. I'm super excited to get to share all of these ideas with you, because I know that, of course, it's really, really late. And I assume that everybody is going to have a beautiful, beautiful night today. And I would like to thank you for being here and for listening to this presentation. You can find me on LinkedIn, my website, or Instagram. You can reach out. And maybe if you make this project, I would love to see your results.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marina. These are fantastic ideas. There are many very positive comments in the chat about people not being able to choose which of the 2 alternatives you have provided because they would like to do both. And you have done a fantastic job answering questions. I feel like
Thank
I
you.
don't need to engage too much in the Q&A. You have already read the questions, answered them, so we can call it a day.
Thank you.
But there are a couple of comments that I wanted to pick up from the chat. And if anybody has more questions, of course, you're welcome to post them. Melissa from in the chat mentions that her students love drawing. So perhaps she could ask them to make a short book, and then they can tell the class about their productions. You mentioned the idea of
Definitely.
doing paper-based newspapers or newsletters. So perhaps mini books could be a nice
I
project.
love it. Sounds wonderful. Yeah.
And something that Nat mentioned early on is that sometimes when we said, okay, everybody's familiar with the format of a TV news program, but Nat points out some children don't really watch the news at home anymore. Did you have to explain to any of the children the format of a news program or to show them a bit of a news program?
Yes, of course. We had the chance to, with my colleague, we we decided to show a few videos that were available on YouTube. For example, showing some of the structure of when it says, for example, breaking news, or the titles, and how much time they used, the presenters used to get to the point of the before the images or the videos showed up, right? So we all had a time to get acquainted with the model in case of not knowing or not being exposed to that. Fortunately, most of them had like a moment at home to discuss it with their families, and most of them knew what to do. But this is also true, right? Nowadays, we get to get our news, or we get to get lots of information from our phones or from the internet. So this was also a way to get a little bit of acquaintance with what we used to do as young learners, we as teachers.
Absolutely. And perhaps that's topic for next year's ELT week for anybody who wants to try it. But you can explore new formats. You can have your students create a video podcast, for example. I'm sure they may not watch the news on TV, but I'm sure all the students are familiar with the type of bloggers or podcasters that we see online on social media, things like Luzu or Olga or that type of
Right.
program.
Yeah,
So
podcast.
why not have a roundtable discussion on a current affairs type topic? This is something, of course, that you can adapt to any kind of mass media format.
Right. Exactly.
One of the questions that was very like practical and having to do with the logistics of it,
Right.
sound wise, how do you manage the recordings in class? Because if you have a room with 20 students and it's my turn to record something and the classroom is noisy and people are doing other things, how did you organize that?
This is an amazing question. What we did basically was to gather in groups, and with my colleague, what we did was to have a moment to stay with them, and the people who had to record went outside with the teacher, recorded, and then went inside back into the classroom. So they all had a time, for example, to play other games, or maybe to recap a little bit of the writing checklist that they had done, so as not to forget it, and or maybe playing some games. So we all knew that it was a project that was open to any possibility, really. And it was not like all of the kids were in the same classroom, and maybe, running around or something. But it's true that that can happen. So I imagine that in that case, what I would do is, for example, have them maybe working with some exit tickets, or maybe some worksheets that are related to a specific prompt, or maybe a game. They can also develop games. I'm super into gamification lately. So with my colleague, we always try to include the kids into activities that maybe they can use their own knowledge of the language into games, for example, in cards, and they can always get to playing. And it's always better to make this kind of organization with a helper or with a teacher. But if it's not possible, I guess that a paper based approach, or as you said, the books are way better.
Yes, or like Natalie mentioned in the previous presentation, perhaps have the students record at home on their own, and then bring the videos and work on the rest of work on the script in class, work on the visuals in class, and then do the actual recording in silence at home.
Exactly.
But yes, it's fantastic what you mentioned about having a colleague to work with, to plan things together, to help you organize the classroom. And peer teaching is so valuable when we're working, especially with projects
Like this.
It's fantastic. If you have the opportunity to work with, I don't know, if you teach Quinto A and your colleague teaches Quinto A and you're both there in the morning, go talk to your colleague about doing something together, because that's always very nice.
Shout out to her. She must be watching. So shout out to Laura. She was great, absolutely stunning. And I also got to learn a lot from her, right? From class management and how to organize the videos and so on. So it was amazing.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you, Laura, as well. Okay, so this is all we have time for today. Thank you so much, Marina, for sharing this wonderful experience and all these fresh ideas with us. This has been fantastic. And for people who have managed to make it till 8:30 in the evening, thank you for staying. You have been very brave and probably hungry. So I will see everybody tomorrow. Tomorrow we have 4 sessions. So get ready. They are 4 short sessions, but 4 sessions all the same. We're going to have Clarisa Godoy and Claudia Cordova talking about mentoring in action, about a support program for secondary school English as a foreign language teachers that they developed in their province. We are going to have Estefania Ferrero talking about English lessons that transform, advancing gender equity through English language teaching. We're going to have Agustina Laporta talking about going beyond likes and downloads in terms of building a community, a reflective teacher community online. And we're going to have finally closing tomorrow, Maria Marta Mora talking about exploratory action research, an approach by teachers for teachers. So that's a lot. I hope to see everybody again tomorrow. I'll be here. So I hope you too. And thank you all for the engagement and the support in the chat. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Marina. Have a good evening.
See you. You too. Likewise.